The Iranian foreign minister on X says that the Strait of Hormuz is open for all commercial vessels. We're just learning this right now. Let me read where we are getting this from X. The foreign minister saying, in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of the ceasefire on coordinated routes as already announced by ports and maritime organizations of the Islamic Republic of Iran. But this is a huge announcement coming from the Iranian foreign minister about what has become a central part of the negotiation, getting the Strait of Hormuz open and safely. And so we're going to bring you much more as we get this in, literally coming in as we're talking about. As we are getting this, we also have a new report that claims that the United States is also considering a $20 billion deal that would help to end the conflict. This is a report from Axios, co-written also by CNN political and global affairs analyst Barack Ravid. Let me read a quote from this reporting now coming in. The U.S. and Iran are negotiating over a 3-page plan to end the war, with one element under discussion being that the U.S. would release $20 billion in frozen Iranian funds in return for Iran giving up its stockpile of enriched uranium. This according to 2 U.S. officials and 2 additional sources briefed on the talks. A lot of breaking news here. Let's get to Nic Robertson. He's in Islamabad on this breaking news first. Nic, what do you make of it?
Look, it seems to me we're getting some positive breakthroughs. The fact that the Iranian foreign minister has said the Strait of Hormuz is open to all commercial vessels really seems to indicate that the talks that the Pakistani mediators are having, and they're going into their 3rd day of talks in Tehran right now, are beginning to bear some fruit. Sources I've been speaking to involved in all of this are sounding and looking very positive about where the talks are at the moment. Of course, I'm not getting an indication of what other hurdles there may be to overcome, but it has been one of the things that Iran has wanted, one of those points. They want assets unfrozen. They want to see sanctions lifted. They want money for war rations and damages. We've been talking here about billions upon billions of dollars. Last weekend at the talks, the Iranians said they'd asked the United States for $8 billion in unfrozen assets. At the time in the talks last Saturday and Sunday, the White House knocked down the suggestion Iran was going to get that. But it's always been part of Iran's core demands. Iran's now lifted, it seems, their own blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. Is that in exchange for money? Are they expecting the money to come? But what the Iranian foreign minister has said, and I think this is very, very telling, and we were talking about this just yesterday, that the reason that the Iranians have lifted their blockade on the Strait of Hormuz for the remaining duration of the ceasefire, probably as the US-Iran ceasefire, which has about 5 days to run. He said this is because that there is a ceasefire in Lebanon. These things have been inextricably linked in the Iranian mind. So while the Pakistani lead negotiating team has been in Tehran talking, of course, that Lebanon deal came through yesterday. We were saying that that was going to aid and benefit the talks in Tehran, and it does seem to be the case. Now, what remain the sticking points? The nuclear issue, that enriched uranium, Iran's commitment and desire for a nuclear bomb, that's always been at the core of US demands. That's what President Trump was saying yesterday. He said Iran had forsworn that it wasn't going to have a nuclear weapon. He also said Iran had agreed to hand over the nuclear dust. We don't have details on that yet. But these moves at the moment sound like that Iran is softening. It sounds like a deal gets closer into view.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nic, on the other side of the screen, we're looking at right along with you is we're seeing, looking at oil prices right now dropping over 9%, Brent crude as well as WTI standard in the States. Oil markets reacting understandably to this news coming in. There's a lot to digest here. Nic Robertson tracking all these developments in Islamabad for us. Let's get over to the White House now. Alayna Treene is there as well. A lot of elements here, Alayna. You've got the announcement coming from the Iranian foreign minister about the Strait. You've got this reporting from Barack Ravid of Axios about a $20 billion in frozen Iranian funds that could be part of the discussion. Something talking about frozen funds being handed over, something President Trump has been highly critical of of the previous nuclear deal in the past. What are you hearing from there right now?
Yeah, highly critical is definitely right. I'd remind you that under the Obama administration, when you had that Iranian nuclear deal, they had handed over $400 million in cash to the Iranians during that agreement. But look, from everything that Nic laid out and that Axios report, it is lining up with the conversations that I am having, which is that there is a lot of optimism right now in that building behind me, Kate, about where things stand around a potential deal. Now, I don't want to be, too optimistic. You hear a lot of this talk among Trump administration officials about how positive they are. There are, of course, still sticking points that remain, as Nic laid out, this idea of the length of time that the Iranians would agree to suspend their enrichment of uranium, and also a deal on having the U.S. or some sort of country going in and retrieving the nuclear material still in Tehran's possession. But they are hopeful that they are getting to a place now where really an agreement is in sight. And I know from the conversations I've been having that Trump administration officials are really working toward and hoping that a potential second round of these talks, of this meeting, could happen in person between the U.S. and Iranians as early as this weekend. Again, things are very fluid, so we have to see what happens today. But today is also a very important day because we know that the Pakistanis have been meeting with Iranian officials in Tehran. The Pakistanis, of course, the key intermediary here between Washington and Tehran. The Pakistanis have been in touch with top Trump administration officials throughout this process. And so really, the goal of those talks in Tehran are to try and get the Iranians to a level of significant compromise where, again, the contours of a potential agreement really could be reached. And that is the goal they're working toward. I'd remind you the ceasefire, the 2-week ceasefire, expires on Tuesday, April 21st. And there's been, there had been talk earlier this week of a possible extension. But from the conversations I've had, Kate, with White House officials, is they want to try and formulate some sort of deal before the ceasefire ends. A very ambitious goal, but it does seem, as today with this latest news about the Iranians reopening the strait thanks to that ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, that they are actually moving closer to that goal. And just to go back to that ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon that, of course, President Trump announced yesterday, I am told that that had a positive effect on some of the talks that are going, of course, between the U.S. and Iran through the Pakistanis on a broader agreement. And so a lot of different developments today that we are learning of. We have to see, I think, these negotiations are continuing. I think a lot of these reports we have to be careful with because things are fluid. These negotiations are not over. An agreement has not been reached. But that's certainly, I think, adding to the level of optimism that this Trump administration feels today as we move into the weekend.
Yeah, there is movement. There is breaking news on this front in this moment that clearly is getting reaction all over the world already. Alayna, thank you very much. John?
Well, so interesting there, if we can keep those numbers up for just a second. Huge drops in oil prices of more than 10%. That's just this morning. And then the stock market, an impressive positive opening, but to a certain extent, I think the stock market has already taken into account that a deal or progress was likely between the United States and Iran. But those drops in the oil prices, and let's just keep those numbers up. You don't see movements like that almost ever. Now 11 points down just in the last 10, 20 minutes. We do have a new Trump Truth Social post here, yes?
So I'm just going to read this to you. This literally just happened a few seconds ago. Donald Trump posting this. The Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for business and full passage, but the naval blockade will remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran only until such time as our transaction with Iran is 100% complete. This process should go very quickly in that most of the points are already negotiated. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald Trump.